Hello everyone, and welcome back to Lucky Crit. Engage is right around the corner, and we've been getting a pretty consistent flood of information from those who have played review copies of the game. So for today, I thought it'd be fun to review the personal skills of all of the characters up to Chapter 8 in the game. So basically what the reviewers were able to play, we can check out those characters and see what they're bringing to the table. Personal skills don't entirely make or break a unit, but they really can add just that little extra spice in making somebody even more powerful than they would have been originally. And they can also nerf some characters and make them the lesser used version of that particular class at times too. So I thought it'd be fun to take a look. So this is thanks to a reviewer and courtesy of user KrashBoomBang on Reddit. So shout out to you guys. But we're starting off here with Allyr, and Allyr's personal ability is Divinely Inspiring. So adjacent allies deal +3 damage and take 1 less damage when they are next to Allyr. I kind of like this. It reminds me a little bit of Byleth's personal, which basically helps students around Byleth gain more experience, as if Byleth was essentially teaching them further on the battlefield. So this gives you more of an opportunity to continue using Allyr near other units and give them a little extra push. So that's fun. Next up we have Alfred here with Self-Improver. If unit uses weight without attacking or using items, grant strength +2 for 1 turn. This is very reminiscent of Dedue's personal ability from 3 houses, where Dedue would get extra defense if he waited, which contributed quite heavily to the memes about Dedue standing still and stuff like that, which is a pretty typical Armor Knight meme for Fire Emblem. In this case, though, Alfred is getting some extra strength, so basically having Alfred move somewhere and sit there through enemy phase gives him an extra strength +2, which sounds pretty nice. It doesn't sound like incredibly amazing or anything, but I could see how that would be very useful, especially going into enemy phase and having a little bit more offensive power for him to attack back if he's getting attacked first. Moving on, we have Yunaka, and Yunaka gets Trained to Kill, so while unit occupies terrain that provides an avoid bonus, grants crit +15. This is pretty interesting. I like this because it really kind of builds off of how you'd probably want to use her in the first place. The extra avoid from avoid tiles is going to be really, really nice, especially on thief units. So basically it's just going to allow her to crit even more often and be a little bit more offensively deadly when you do have her on a really good tile to begin with. Next up we have Louis, and Louis has Admiration. If 2 female allies are adjacent within 2 spaces, this unit takes 2 less damage during combat. So Louis likes to be around the women. What's up, ladies? It's honestly a little bit of a specific personal, not usually my favorite because they're kind of hard to pull off and honestly even remember on the battlefield a lot of the time, but you know, that's a thing. Clearly that's going to be based off of his personality, I'd assume. Moving on to Alchrist, we have Get Behind Me. When an ally within 2 spaces is attacked, grant strength +3 to unit for 1 turn. Once again, another kind of very specific one. It's unclear if this is going to go into the next turn or if this is more about giving Alchrist the ability to counterattack as a nearby ally and help out his friends a little bit more, but we will have to see. Moving on to Citrinne, we have Generosity. When this unit uses a healing item, adjacent allies also recover the same amount of HP. This one's pretty fun because if you remember from Citrinne's character bio, basically Citrinne is kind of like a royal adjacent. I think she has some family that are royalty, and she as a character is pretty well off and she loves giving money to her friends. So in the same vein, her personal ability is basically when she uses a healing item, it's also shared to her friends as well. So that's kind of cool. Nothing like game breaking or anything there, but once again, a nice tie into her actual character, which I think makes a lot of sense. Moving on to Lapis. Lapis has Share Spoils, so if there is an ally within 1 space, grants hit and avoid +10 at a cost of crit -10 to unit. This honestly seems like a pretty fair trade. We haven't seen yet if this game is going to be as breakable as 3 Houses was in some respects, whereas, you know, a character like Ignatz could pretty easily get 100 crit, at which point you wouldn't really care about the crit -10 here. But I would say that the trade of -10 crit for the extra hit and avoid seems pretty worthwhile, and it doesn't seem like it's too specific. Obviously, you just need the 1 ally within 1 space near Lapis. So I kind of like this one. I think this could create some interesting possibilities on the battlefield. Next up, we have Jean, and this is a character that we didn't actually know about until very recently. Jean is basically going to fulfill the villager character spot on your roster. He is the new Donald or Cyril from 3 Houses, essentially, and as such, he comes with the skill Expertise, which grants the unit enhanced stat growth when leveling up. So once again, it's kind of like Aptitude. He will essentially get amazing level ups, but he's going to probably start a little bit behind other folks and will require some extra tender love and care to be a more useful unit in your army. It's also worth noting that there is no villager class from what we know. Jean is coming as a martial monk, kind of like Fram if I'm not mistaken, so keep that in mind too. Moving on, we have Chloe, and Chloe has Fairy Tale Folk. If a male and a female ally are adjacent within 2 spaces, unit deals +2 damage during combat. Honestly, out of all of them so far, this one scares me the most, and here's why. I am terrified that they're going to give Chloe the Catria/Cordelia treatment, where essentially she is the unrequited love Pegasus Knight girl, where she's obsessed with either the main lord or another character that pretty much doesn't know that she exists, and yet her entire personality is built around the fact that she has a crush or extreme interest in that person. And this personal ability really makes me fear that that will in fact be the case, because I don't really get why she's getting her personal ability where she's dealing 2 extra damage if there's a male and female around her. It's kind of like she's the awkward third wheel looking on as another couple is nearby and engaging in combat, and she's kind of wistful and forlorn. So, you know, this one scares me. I'm kind of sad already. Chloe is one of my favorite designs so far, and I'm a little scared for her future and her endings. But let's keep going. Next up, we have Anna. Anna's personal ability is Make a Killing. She may obtain 500 gold when the unit defeats a foe, and the trigger percent is her luck stat. So this one seems pretty adequate. I mean, you know, throughout the series, all the Annas are obsessed with money and earning money, so I think this makes sense. It's unclear how useful this is going to be in terms of the money in the game and also how often this is going to trigger. But if we can take a look at her stats there, at level 6 she only has 3 luck. So I'm guessing this is not going to be super broken, just an occasional extra gold drop. But you know what? Half a bullion every now and again doesn't seem too bad to me. Next up we have Etie, and Etie's skill is Energized. So when unit recovers HP using an item, grants strength +2 for 1 turn. So essentially, if she's running around and dropping a vulnerary on player phase, then she'll get some extra strength through enemy phase. That seems okay, but again, I think we could have had something a little bit more exciting here for her. Etie's another one of my favorite designs, so unfortunately, I don't love that one, but I think, you know, as long as she's getting hurt on the battlefield and then healing, she'll get a little extra strength, so there's that. Next up, we have Celine, and Celine's is Gentle Flower. Recovery items used by allies within 2 spaces heal +50% HP. This is another support one, where basically it's more concerned about her allies, but I think this one makes sense and looks really nice, quite frankly. Anybody within 2 spaces of them who's using recovery items like vulneraries and such are going to heal an additional % of HP, so, you know, if you've got allies that are dying, you can have Celine run up to them during your phase and just end her turn within 2 spaces of them, and then have them use their own recovery item and heal a little bit extra to kind of get them back up to speed. So that sounds pretty fun, but again, it is kind of limited because it's only recovery items, not any kind of healing or anything, which I think Celine will probably be doing, considering she is quite focused on magic as well herself. So a little interesting there, but I guess it could be pretty useful. Next up, we have Boucheron. Boucheron's got Move to Tears. When an ally joins a chain attack in this unit's combat, unit deals +2 damage. So this is another one that's probably based around Boucheron's personality as well. It seems like when an ally actually helps him in battle by doing a chain attack, which is basically the sort of Fire Emblem Awakening, Fire Emblem Fates sort of dual attack, dual strike type of situation. Essentially, he's going to be happy that they helped him out, and he'll deal an extra +2 damage himself. I guess he quite appreciates the support from his allies. Next up, we have Vander, and what's interesting about Vanders, Frams, and clans is they all have pretty similar ones, so we will get to them, but Vander has Alabaster Duty. If unit is adjacent to the Divine Dragon, grants crit +5 during combat to both of them. So this is pretty nice, as Vander is kind of the Jagan character of this game, where he's this promoted Cavalier unit that you'll be able to use from the very beginning. He can kind of help you out with some of the tougher moments or challenges early on, especially on the harder difficulties. So having him placed right next to Allyr is going to grant them a pretty nice crit +5 buff, as well as the next few characters that we'll talk about too, gives a nice little spectrum that you'll be able to take a lot of advantage of. So, I mean, later on in the game, is this going to be very useful? Likely not, unless you have Vander just following Allyr constantly, or Allyr somehow managing to keep up with Vander. even though it doesn't seem like Cavaliers have the most movement this time around, with Vander starting off with 6. But still, I think keeping them together is probably going to be easier said than done, especially later. So it stinks that he doesn't have something more specific to help out himself, to help his Jagan nature from falling off late game, which he probably will do. But, you know, that's what happens. Next up, we have Fram, and like Vander, hers is very similar. So Fram has Crimson Cheer. If unit is adjacent to the Divine Dragon, grants Avoid +10 during combat to both of them. So again, if she is next to Allyr, they'll both get Avoid +10, which I think is great. That's going to open the door to some really cool strategies where maybe you might be in a tough spot and Allyr is about to die or take some serious amount of damage, and then you want to have Fram run up and just stand next to Allyr for that extra Avoid +10, which could save you in a pinch. So again, it does kind of stink that it doesn't really help her outside of being near Allyr and focusing her character around Allyr. But at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of people are going to use Allyr pretty heavily, and I'm sure Allyr is going to be a required unit on story maps and stuff, so it's not exactly too hard to get use out of it, for sure. Next up, we have Clan, and same deal. Clan has Verdant Faith. If unit is adjacent to the Divine Dragon, grants hit +10 during combat to both of them. This could also really help you if your hit rate is looking a little low and you've got like some XCOM numbers where you don't want to take a big risk trying to attack with a 60%, and you want to kind of secure a kill more solidly. Having Clan next to Allyr is going to help out with that as well. And also this opens up the possibility with all 3 of these units that if you have them all circling around Allyr, you'll get a nice hit +10, avoid +10, and also crit +5 during Allyr's attacks, which is pretty sweet, honestly. So you can really make Allyr even better with the right unit placement. So that sounds pretty fun to me. I'm sure that Allyr won't really need that much help to begin with, but, you know, it's a nice possibility. Next up, we have Diamant, and Diamant has Fair Fight. If unit initiates combat, grants hit +15 to unit and foe if foe is able to counterattack. This basically allows them to have a more, I guess, safe, even combat where both units are much more likely to hit. So you could probably guarantee a kill much more solidly with Diamant. If you could finish off the foe before they get a chance to follow up, then it's just a solid hit +15, which is pretty cool. This is one that I kind of like, but again, it's going to have some limitations because the foe will have to be able to counterattack to get it. And it's also only on player phase, of course. Next up, we have Amber, and Amber has Aspiring Hero. If no other units are within one space of unit or foe, grants hit +20 at a cost of avoid -10 during combat. So again, if Amber is by himself and the enemy that Amber is facing is by themselves, you'll get hit +20 and avoid -10, essentially much more guaranteeing that you're both going to hit each other and you'll take the damage as opposed to avoiding it, which could have been likely beforehand, but avoid -10 does kind of stink. Again, this one's kind of oddly specific. You're going to have to ensure that Amber is alone and the enemy's alone and they're not just stacking up all near each other while you're fighting. So it's not my favorite, but it could guarantee Amber some hits that maybe he wouldn't have been hitting off on his own somewhere on the battlefield. So I think that could also be useful in certain scenarios as well. Next up, we have Ivy, and Ivy has Single-Minded. During combat with a foe who is also unit's most recent opponent, grants hit +20. This to me sounds kind of like, you know, if you battled somebody on enemy phase, then moving into player phase, Ivy's going to get a straight up hit +20 when they go to attack that same foe. I suppose it could also work out too if you have Ivy attack first and then dance Ivy or use one of Violet's special Emblem ring abilities that kind of refreshes her. Then once she attacks again, she'll get that extra hit +20. It sounds pretty good, honestly. Next, we have Kagetsu, who has Blinding Flash. So if unit initiates combat, it inflicts avoid -10 on foe during combat, essentially solidly giving you a bonus of hit +10 during player phase, which is pretty cool. I think in cases where you have a weapon triangle disadvantage, this will really help Kagetsu out a bit more, because you'll have that extra little drip of hit chance to be able to hit them. Next up, there's Zelkov, and Zelkov has Not Quite. If foe initiates combat, inflicts hit -10 on that foe during combat. So basically, during enemy phase, if someone is running up to Zelkov here, who's going to be a thief character, you probably don't want him to get hit, especially if we take a look at his defense stat, of course. Not looking too solid there at 6 compared to stats like his speed, of course. Typical thief build on him, so you really don't want him to get hit on the enemy phase, and that enemy is going to have a little bit tougher of a chance to hit him during combat, which is kind of nice. It basically gives him avoid +10 during enemy phase. Now we have Hortensia, and this is actually a pretty surprising one. I wasn't really thinking that this was going to be the case for her, this kind of direction. I guess, of course, I don't exactly know that much about Hortensia yet at this point in time, but I just did not expect her to be more of a healer character. So Hortensia has big personality. When unit uses a healing staff, grants range +1. So it gives her a nice extra range for healing spells and stuff. I'm assuming she'll probably be able to get Physic or other spells along that vein to take advantage of that extra range. But I guess I just didn't view Hortensia as like a healer kind of a character, so that's interesting. Now we have a fun duo here with Hortensia's retainers, both Goldmary and Rosado. Goldmary's got Disarming Sigh. If the foe is male, inflicts hit -20 on that foe during combat. Basically, her cute little smile is going to make it so that the male enemies have a little bit harder of a time being able to hit her during combat. In a bit of a reversal, but also a similar scenario, we have Rosado here with Stunning Smile. Once again, if the foe is male, inflicts a void -20 on that foe during combat. So whereas Goldmary is inflicting hit -20 on them, where they kind of will struggle to hit her a bit more, Rosado is going to make it so that it's easier to hit your opponent during combat. They're so, I guess, confused looking at Rosado and how cute Rosado is that Rosado's going to get a nice little buff to being able to beat them down during combat. So that's pretty fun. I kind of like these. Obviously, they're very gender specific based on the characters that you're fighting, but I think they work, and it's going to be much easier to pull off than a lot of the other ones we've come across so far, so those seem quite good to me. Next up, we have Lumera here. This is not, as far as we know, a recruitable character. We've already seen cutscenes and footage of Lumera's death early on in the game. I mean, this is Fire Emblem. This is a parent character. If you really think they're going to live, I'm sorry, you sweet summer child. It's not going to last. So this is actually an enemy boss skill on Maddening mode, it seems. And this is Unbreakable, prevents the unit from being broken. This makes a lot of sense because the new break mechanic is something that Fire Emblem Engage is focusing on heavily, where after attacking with Weapon Triangle Advantage, you could basically make it so that you get a free follow-up attack with another unit on that enemy before they're able to counter, which seems really useful and really nice, and a new layer of strategy added into the typical Fire Emblem formula. But I think it also makes sense, too, that bosses would not be able to be affected in that way. It seems a little bit too powerful, and we want to make sure that the bosses stay scary, so I think this absolutely makes sense, putting on a boss character. And we have another boss character here in Abeam? Abeam? I don't know, but Veteran Plus prevents the unit from being broken, negates damage from effectiveness. So kind of building off of Unbreakable there, it's an even better Unbreakable. You're not going to be able to break this unit, and also it negates any damage from effective weapons. So right now for Abeam here, this is an Axe Armor classed character. Typically a rapier or a hammer would do increased damage against them. In this case, not going to happen. So you'll have to find other creative ways to beat down bosses with this Veteran Plus skill. But this is also on Maddening mode, so you may not have to fear this one as much if you're playing on the easier difficulties. On top of that, this reviewer also nicely shared with us the fact that on both hard and Maddening modes, you have 10 rewinds of your dragon charges, basically the turn wheel of this game, the divine pulse of Fire Emblem Engage, to be able to undo moves and actions and make different decisions on the battlefield. Capping out at 10, I feel like, is really fair, especially on harder maps. You'll probably find yourself using a lot of these. I've definitely blown through a lot of charges of Divine Pulse and stuff over time, so I think 10 is a very fair and solid number to land at, and it's nice that we now know this going into the game, so keep that in mind if you are going to be playing on the harder difficulties. You'll have 10 chances to not mess up on the battlefield. If you haven't yet, be sure to check out my character bio video where we go through all of the revealed character bios that we've gotten so far for Fire Emblem Engage. That's going to do it for this video. Please let me know who are your favorite personal skills in the comment section down below. Who are the characters that you're most excited to use? With that, I hope you'll look forward to me streaming Fire Emblem Engage when it launches, and I will see you all next time.